Okay. I think we're live. We are live. Woohoo! All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to our first ever podcast. My name is Olivia, but you can call me Ollie.
And I'm Olivia, but you can call me Livy.
We're going to kind of start a little basic here. We are both, we're in like two different parts of the country too. We're East Coast and then like
Central Time.
So we're learning as we go here. And my brain just decided to quit on me. Yep. That's gonna be happening a lot. It's cool. It's cool. We're learning, we're growing. We're both writers. We'll start at the very basics. We're both writers and artists. And we actually met over a year ago in upstate New York at the Lamplighters Guild writers retreat that they were having, which was an amazing week that we both at times weren't sure if we were going to survive.
It's like camp all in one, but absolutely amazing experience. And we ended up being the roommates.
Yeah. Yep, that's how we met. Actually, we were roommates. It was crazy. We were like staying right next to each other when we were like checking in the first day, and I was like, "Oh yeah, my name's Olivia," and then the guy was like, "Oh yeah, oh her name's Olivia too." Like, yo, oh you guys are in the same room.
Yeah, and I think we just stared at each other and we're like, "Okay."
Yep, and funny story actually. My thought, well, that like when I first met you was, okay, this is a new person. How's this gonna go? Are we gonna get along? I hope we get along. What if we don't get along? Maybe I don't want to be here. Is it too late for me to go? So yeah.
The impression actually was like you had this amazing curly hair, and I just remember going, "Oh my goodness, I just want to touch it."
Yeah, because my hair was like longer, and I had it up in like these two little like floofy buns on top of my head because my hair was actually very annoying and unruly, and I was like, I need to look like a human being while I'm here this week, so stick it up just out of my way. So yeah, oh my gosh, that's funny. Very cool, very cool. So that kind of being a baseline for this whole first episode. We're going to be talking a little bit about writing and just our preferences, how we got started with writing and how we're still getting started with writing. We are both aspiring authors and just artists in general. We'll be covering a lot of topics about art and just the world and exploring the beauty of what God has made throughout creation and throughout his people. So it's gonna be a fun time, and I hope y'all like stick around and keep up with us. It's gonna be a fun time. Am I right?
Yes, it's gonna be fun. So
Woo!
yeah, the first one we're going to answer for you all is what's one book from your childhood that left a lasting impression on
you? Okay, so I was I actually wrote the questions, and I wrote this one down. And I was like, oh, that's gonna be a good question. That's gonna be a good question. Then I was like, I have to answer it too. What am I going to say? So that took me a hot second, but I finally was able to settle on when I was little, the American Girl books. Huge impact on my life. Like those books inspired so much of like my early writing and how I saw like storytelling. My mom would read those books to me. Like in the beginning, she read all of them to me, and then I went back and I just reread those books like 50 bajillion times. My favorite American Girl was Josefina. because when I was little, I was like, hey, she kind of looks like me, and I thought that was really cool. So I was just like, hey. And she's such a hopeful character as well. She never gave up, and even when things seemed really bleak and like, oh, this is never gonna work, she still just kind of stuck it out and was like, nope, there's still hope. And I took that to heart as a little girl, like just being like, wow, I want to be as hopeful and as like optimistic as Josefina. So, uh, yeah, the American Girl books are like when I think of being a kid, I'm like, American Girl all the way. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I was introduced with Samantha because that was my mom's favorite, and
Yes.
she would say like, "Yeah, that was mine, so I'll introduce you to her." I think it was around 10, if I remember correctly. So that was about, I want to say, a few years after I learned to read or something like that. I
Nice.
was not sort of a pre-reader before then, so.
Mhm. Mhm.
But that was before I realized that imagination is such a powerful thing, and that's
Yeah.
what's required in writing a book. And so I had a very active imagination ever since I was young, and then I discovered
Yeah.
the books, and I'm like, these are thoughts of people who think differently, act differently than I can. I can learn so much from these characters, and in a way that actually enhances my imagination and not hinder it in a lot of times. So, but it's kind of funny that you chose a historical thing because I'm
Yes.
definitely much more of a fantasy thing. So I was more drawn to like Narnia popped into my head when you said,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and it may sound cliche, but then of course I think I remember finding out that C.S. Lewis was inspired by George MacDonald, and one of
Mm.
my favorite books of his is actually this one called Night Girl and Day Boy or something, and it's a fairy tale. It's an amazing, fascinating concept of a girl who can only be awake at night and kind of grew up like Rapunzel, reverse Rapunzel,
Huh.
in her tower, but she could not see anything during the day, and so she could not stand light. And then this other guy who couldn't stand night, anything without light,
Huh.
and their relationship of how they met. And so I kind of, and he, I think, also had wrote a book called On the Back of the North Wind, which is an amazing book about a dad
Oh.
and a young boy as well.
Yeah. Okay, I have not read either of those books, but I remember you telling me about um Night Girl and Day Boy. I remember you telling me about that one. Um, I think Focus on the Family did a radio drama of On the Back of the North Wind, and I was so curious about that because yeah, I'm always looking for like good fantasy to read. So I'll
Oh,
have to. I forgot about those books. I need to read those.
yeah, I would definitely read On the Back of the North Wind. That's a one that stuck in my memory ever since I read it. And of course, the audio is just as great, but the book it has a lot more, I think, philosophical or
Mm,
theological
mm,
concepts behind it. So I think that's what
yeah.
drew me into that story a lot more. But
Yep.
in kind of a similar vein, I remember liking High Speed on High Places,
Oof. Good
which is
book.
fantastic, and there's a lot of things that we can learn, and
Mm-hmm.
like it's basically a spiritual journey as you go on a physical journey, which is sounds
Yeah.
very much like Pilgrim's Progress, which I also grew up
Yeah. Yeah.
listening. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of these characters, things that we deal with every day, and realize, and in a very personalized personification of something,
Yeah.
is, I think, what stuck with me the most. Those were the ones that inspired me as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah. It takes you back, doesn't it? You're just like, wow. I it's cool how like a memory like that, like when you actually really stop to like look at the memory, it like you can start to remember how you felt when you'd be reading those books like the first time, and how intrigued you were and how curious and how like I want to know more. And then like and not only that, but I remember I read a lot, like I would read like a lot of historical fiction.
Mm.
And then yeah, of course, like Narnia and Lord of the Rings, um, and I just remember as I would read those books, worlds would be like they were being built in my own head, like inspired by everything that I read, even like so. And I just all of a sudden like got like that feeling back again, and I'm like, hold on, I need to just, sorry, the podcast has to stop here. I need to go and like write a story. So I'll just like, catch you later.
Funny that you would think that nostalgia is just for the older people or people
mm,
with memories, but I really think that younger people can have nostalgia as well. And I
oh
think
yeah.
why we cling to so many familiar books and reread them over and over and
Oh
over
yeah.
until your parents think you're crazy because you've read that for like the 50 millionth time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like just a little bit, not only brings all of that back, but it reteaches you how to write well as well.
Yeah.
To this
Yep.
thing of writing is that it really definitely not left only an impression for personal life, but
Mhm.
how we approach our own writing.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I distinctly remember excuse me, when I started actually writing like my own stories, whatever book I was reading at the time, my writing style would kind of mimic just a little bit whoever I was reading at the time, because like I would just be full of how, the way they would use punctuation and the way, or the way they might build a sentence. I kind of like it just kind of rubbed off on me. And so and that I just I remember thinking to myself, like as a kid, I'd be like, you know, oh, you're just copying, so and so and like the book that they wrote. So I would try very hard to make sure that I was actually like writing like my own thing. But at the same time, I would just get so inspired by everyone that I was reading that I just kind of couldn't help but like have a little bit of that flavor in there, because it was just like it was in my head. What can I do? I'm just like trying to put the words down, and I'm like, oh, but that person used that really cool word. I liked that word. I'm just gonna leave that in there. So,
Actually, it's funny because I was telling you earlier about watching 12th Night
mm,
before this episode. And
favorite Shakespeare play.
the Shakespeare is,
Oof.
I have a friend who absolutely loves it. In fact,
Mm.
would watch almost every single version that she could get her hands on. And not only that, but like, going back to the writing and just having like that flavor of whatever you previously read or were chewing on basically
Hmm.
was
I like
she
this food analogy we're going with. Flavor, chewing. What time is it? I think we're hungry. Dinner was a while ago.
anyway, I just remember she would actually speak it, and we actually tried forming it in the same way and talk to each other. We
That's
managed
awesome.
to do it for like a minute, no, like a few minutes before we were like, yeah, there's this is to do. At this,
Okay, and that's where it stops.
yeah, I think we were entering a class too, so we were like top pressured and we just couldn't keep it up. But I
Wow.
think that was more on my part because I was not a huge fan of his at that moment in time. But
Mm,
I just remember that's what memory came up when you were talking about it. I was like, oh,
yeah.
this is, I think you'd appreciate.
Nice, nice. So, okay, so we have another question here. Question two: what was the first piece of real writing that you did, and how old were you? How did Livy the writer get started?
Okay, so I kind of began reading, I think, around age whenever I was in first grade. I was a little bit of a late bloomer, just I was just a little tad behind, I think.
No.
But once I, started rolling, I kept up. But consequently, we did because I was homeschooled. We would do
Mm.
a bunch of writing things.
Same. Yep.
It was, and a lot of the assignments I would um, definitely enjoy the most would be the ones of like, okay, we were being taught about Roman history and the fall, like what would it be like to be a Christian at that time? And so write a short story or something along those lines. So a lot of my writing, I think, started really from school assignments.
Yeah.
But the one that kind of first true one that I think stuck in my mind right now is the story that I told you about called, I personally call it Mira, but it's the one where the human conscience being symbolized as a stone and how
Mm.
it passes from somehow ending up following the biblical arc of the human history, and this stone which is given to man falls into the wrong hands. So consequently, she automatically reflects whatever character this entity has automatically. So she's more of like an actual mirror, which is where that Latin word root came from. It's like very,
Oh.
was a little, you know, inspired. We kind of did a smattering of the most basic level of Latin and Greek root words, and so that's
Yep.
how I knew about that. But that's the first story I think where I was like, oh, I could write something similar to like Hind's Feet and High Places, where it's the allegorical or whatever.
Nice.
So that I think that was the first true one.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. Wow. That's actually really, really funny. That your first real piece of writing is something so profound, because my first, like, when I first started like writing, I remember one day I was like, how old was I? Like six or seven. I forget. I had just read a book, or mom had just read a book to me. I do not remember which one it was, but I was just super inspired, and I was like just feeling it all over, and I was like, I'm just gonna write a book. So I got like I got a big stack of paper, and I drew a picture of a boy. I think he was like in his room, and he was like putting a hat on or something. I don't even remember what he was doing. And it was really funny because when I would do the picture, I drew his hair, and he had like a little apple top, like his hair was just like just two little things on top of his head like that. And interestingly enough, I called his name was Joker.
Huh.
And at that point in time, I had no knowledge of like DC Joker, so I just thought it was. And then and so yeah, and I wrote the sentence that I wrote for for the first page of this picture book that I was writing was something about like Joker woke up and got dressed. Next page showed Joker at the table, and I think he was eating breakfast. The sentence to go with that: Joker ate breakfast. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Okay, next page. So that was, and then I think the book was just called like Joker's Day or something like that. And so it was just the day in the life of this boy. And I just remember I had so much fun drawing the pictures and writing those little sentences. And the books actually did develop. I wrote those books, I think, into my teens. And like the pictures started to get a little bit more, they were still very simplistic because that was the whole idea behind the concept, was I was just supposed to be simplistic. Um, but I just remember thinking, like, eventually it got to a point, like, where I would write these picture books and these stories, and my intention was, like, I wrote them thinking about, kids possibly reading them, and I thought that was really cool. Um, Sunny, oh my gosh, funny side note. I can't speak. Funny side note, I was eating breakfast one morning, shortly after I like shortly after I started writing the first book, I think, or maybe it was right after I finished writing the first book, and my brother was also eating breakfast, and I think he was eating like peanut butter crunch or something, and on the back of the peanut butter crunch box, um, was like, how they'll just have like those little activity things on the back of cereal boxes. It was like one of those. And I read the word, or actually rather the abbreviation PC. And I just thought that was so cool. I was like, PC, huh, that's really cool. That sounds like a name. That's going to be Joker's sister's name. So I named her PC, not realizing that the PC on the back of the box stood for personal computer. So I just thought it was a cool, like, when I read it in my brain, it was like PC. Oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, sounds like a name. I think I'm going to name a character that. And then Joker and PC, like, crazy names. You're just like, why do these parents hate their children? You have Joker, PC, and then they have a little sister named Addie. She escaped with the most normal name. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. And they all had the same hairstyle. They all had like the
Of course, they're genetically, have to be,
Of course, of course. So yeah, so as simplistic and kind of like cheesy as that is, um, that was my first time writing really anything. And when I got the idea, so like that feeling, that sense so strongly in my spirit, and I was like, I knew um, I wanted to write this story, and it never stopped from then. And of course, as I got older, like my writing, like my stories got more elaborate, um, and then I just found that I really loved just writing anything. Um, so yeah, yep. It all started though with the Joker books. Yeah,
Oh
yep.
wow, that
There you
is
have it.
unexpected. Funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, to
So,
be fair though, you started earlier than me, I think, because when I started reading the Mira story, I think I was like at least 11 or 12.
oh, gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I was gonna say that's first of all, that's just a really awesome concept, and then second of all, I'm like, that's a really awesome concept. That's incredibly advanced for a tiny child.
Yeah.
Bravo! I salute you, madam.
Yeah, no, I'm still confused on the topic. There's still room to explore, you all. Just
It's
take
like
sweet time there.
it's like Star Wars. It's like an endless galaxy. There's so much to discover, so much to learn, endless possibilities. You could do anything with the galaxy.
Yeah,
It's like that. Endless possibilities to explore.
endless wonder. There we go.
So we have roughly 10 minutes before we should release our faithful listeners and watchers. So let's hit one more question, and we don't want to bore our beloved fans,
Yeah, definitely.
right? Right?
Just trying to. I'm just going through the list here.
Oh yeah, yeah, no problem. Pick a good one. And all y'all tune in for our next podcast. We'll pick this up where we leave it off
Yeah.
today, because this is interesting. So okay, all right, third question. Hit me.
Um, I am fascinated by question 8, which is
Question 8.
out of the fairy tales, which is your favorite? and your least favorite.
Ah, yes. Excellent. Okay. All right. Favorite fairy tale. Okay, I will be honest. Because I know how most of the actual fairy tales go, I kind of avoided them because I was like, that's terrible. Such horrible things happen to these people. This is what kind of a story is this for children? What's happening? I was kind of appalled. So I pretty much just stick with Disney. So I'm kind of when I when I wrote this question, I was like thinking Disney, but then I was like, well, in reality, it's the actual fairy tales. Um,
Mm.
so I will do my best with my limited knowledge of the fairy tales. But I did have to pick Beauty and the Beast, like that. Reason for that, if the actual story ends terribly, don't tell me, okay? I want to live in blissful ignorance and think
All
that
right.
they
Noted.
lived happily ever after, okay? That's how it ends, happily ever after. Um, but no, according to the Disney version, I just really liked Belle. I thought she was really smart, and she's into books. She loves books, and I was just like, yes, queen, like books all the way. So, and I just thought she was incredibly different from like all the other Disney princesses current like at that time, because like she was the first princess in my well, she wasn't actually a princess, but she was the first one in my mind that actually kind of did something with her life and was doing something with her life. Like she she was always reading. She's like smart,
Yeah.
she's super kind, she's not shallow, she's kind of holding out for what she actually wants, even though she's not entirely sure what it is that she wants. um which I just kind of appreciated. That I was like, she's not just like, I don't know, I thought she was kind of one of the more down to earth princesses. um so the whole vibe um, of Beauty and the Beast, I just really um, kind of gravitated towards that. Um, so yeah, I don't. And again, I'm not 100% on the actual story because I was always kind of scared of the actual story. I was like, oh, this is
I have
terrifying.
not read the ending of that one. So I'm kind of in the similar boat where I didn't actually read all of the endings. I just, up with a lot, like
Yeah.
Hansel and Gretel. Like I ended up reading, I think, that one, and then I watched a terrifying film, which I was just like floored by how um, horrific it was. I kind of want to say that that's probably where the horror side of things came from, because it literally is a horror thing genre. It's not. I don't think even it should be considered a fairy tale.
Yeah.
All the dark tales
Yeah.
should be considered horror genre, and then all of the fairy tales should be considered like, I don't know, the princess stories and other things.
Yeah.
But
Honestly, I think Hansel and Gretel is my least favorite just because it's so freaky. And I'm
it,
like, this
yeah,
is not okay.
yeah, burning children, no. That, like, it's just it kind of ranks up with Dracula,
Hmm.
the heart moments and killing things. I'm like, okay, alrighty there. I don't think my kids are gonna be sleeping at night. I can't sleep at night, let alone
Right?
a child. Um, but yeah, actually, what came through my thought was this Russian fairy tale, which is
Oh,
like they still kind of end up sad, just because Russians are very tend to be very um, philosophical
very
thinkers.
deep
So
thinking. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so even if they end well, like there's still that little nugget of like, okay, what's the point of the story? Why
Yeah.
like there oftentimes the fairy tales in Russia anyway dwell on a lot of like, there's the fool that suddenly becomes rich and popular and has all the fame, which is very typical and expected. But then
Yep.
you learn these little slivers of life truths throughout the story, which I really enjoy, and
Yeah.
consequently two of my favorite fairy tales are Russian, because one is about an actual magic horse. It's the humpback horse or pony.
Oh,
I
interesting.
I managed to find a book that not only had a fantastic illustration that looks very classically Russian, you know, where it has that little beautiful gold scroll and style of it looks like Byzantine style almost, but with
Ooh.
bright colors and like the fine lines of silver or gold outlined. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very tastefully, artfully done in the typical Russian folklore
Mm.
style, but it was also rewritten for in like a ballad or lyrical poetic form. So everything
Ooh.
sort of rhymes on top of everything else. So you have this entire fairy tale story um, uh, in a poet form, sort of like their Shakespearean, like our
Yeah.
Shakespeare version of it.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that story, even though it's, you know, so outrageously. I love horses, so I guess that's part of my childhood nostalgia. But I also find it fascinating that that it's a tiny little thing. It's not
Yeah.
wasn't going to amount to much and was overlooked and looked down upon, but yet he has such a gentle nature and giving personality. So he would always be granting wishes, almost like the genie.
Aw.
Which might point, you know, point out to like the what is it, the psychological issues of the pony. But besides that, it's a very beautiful, you know, simple story. But the other one was kind of a tragic tale in a different story.
Mm.
I remember it's one of my favorites too, even though the sad ending. But it's called the Snow Child or something like that, where
Oh.
an old elderly couple couldn't have children, so they made a snowman, and of course the snow child ended up becoming a real child. But she would she started to but after a few years that, you know, she quirks like not wanting to go near fires or or some or during the summer she
Mm.
would start like being lethargic and everything. But they didn't really think much about it until they had this traditional event where they had to leap over the bonfire, which, you know,
Ah.
it's an anyway, but you know, nobody asks us. But eventually she ends up, you know, going over that and melting, and so she never comes back home to this elderly couple. So they end up never knowing what happened to her and never being able to say goodbye. So that entire fairy tale is somewhat of a downer. Um, and
Oh.
it's kind of both like my favorite and non-favorite fairy tale, going back to the question. But I think my least favorites are the ones where they're just like, what's this book? You know, why did I waste my life reading this? Like, is there
Yeah.
actually a lesson in here besides like stay away from strangers or, you know?
I know. It's like, oh my gosh, twisted people, what's happening?
Well, that's probably the point, actually, is to realize that, you know, life is not as happy as we all make it out to be sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, that's
Yep.
that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. It is interesting. I do fairy tales are very unique, and I think it would be really cool to have like a whole episode on fairy tales and kind of explore this idea more, and just how like fairy tales, like depending on where they come from, like especially the the older ones that come from like Europe, they're very dark, and I think usually one of the reasons for that, I think I have heard it said, is because the mortality rate was so high that people tended to actually have um, they kept their mortality at the front of their minds a lot more because it was it was kind of like a record if you actually made it to like your 20s or your 30s or what have you. Like, so instead of being all wishy-washy and flim-flammy about everything and being like, oh, life is, you know, blah, 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 they were just like, no, let's be realistic. You might die.
Going to realistic.
You could die. You are going to die. It's like, it's children.
I don't know, but they might have been far more strong because of that, though, too. So
yeah,
I never
yeah,
thinking about it. I mean, honestly, though, I think that's part of the reason why fairy tales are such a good thing for children and adults is
yeah.
you can deal with such serious things as characters, maybe.
Yep. Yeah.
Or you actually enter into real life, or I don't know how that relates.
Yeah. Yeah. They're honestly, they kind of remind me of like parables. You know, they're truths wrapped in um hmm, wrapped in something. My brain just decided to not do anything. It's, you know, uh just life lessons that are made into bite-sized pieces. You know, something that's a bit easier to understand, something that I was going to say relate to, but I'm just like, yes, because we've all had slippers made of glass that are incredibly comfortable and you know, pumpkin carriages. That's I can relate to that very, very much. Um,
Not in that case.
but yeah. So fabulous, fabulous. So okay. Well, we are at time, I believe. Um, but I would call this pretty successful, if I do say so myself. What do you guys think? What are some of your thoughts? You know, hit us up in the comments. What are your favorite fairy tales? What's your least favorite fairy tale? Is there a fairy tale out there that maybe is not as well known? You know, there are a lot of folk tales and fairy tales and all that kind of cool stuff um, from everywhere, all over the place. So tell us a story. Tell us something new in the fairy tale world. We would love to hear about that. And who knows, maybe we'll even do like an episode on it or something and kind of delve deeper into these concepts and these thoughts.
And you could use one of your questions and we could talk about it or give an opinion
Yep.
about it if we
Yep.
actually take the time to possibly even read that story you recommend and get back to you all.
Yes. Yes. Send us some content, and you never know. We'll just be like, yes, this episode was written by our loving and adoring fans. We are here because you listen. So we certainly do hope that you will come back and listen again, and we appreciate y'all hanging with us this time.
And look forward to the second episode in which we'll try to go through another section of the writing questions, and then we can come up with something new to compare as well.
Mm-hmm.
So see you all then.
Bye. Until next time.